Hey guys, Shalana here. Welcome to the Binge Zone. On today's video, we're going to be looking at the Netflix miniseries Self-Made, the story of Madam C.J. Walker. And it's a very interesting story. I really enjoyed these 4 episodes of the miniseries, but we're going to break down the characters, the plot, and the theme to get a better understanding of not just the series, but the overall cultural impact of Madam C.J. Walker and how that affects us to this very day. So without further ado, let's dive into this. The story takes place over 100 years ago, right after the emancipation of the slaves, and we have Sarah Breedlove, who ends up becoming Madam C.J. Walker. And we kind of skip, we see a preview of her early life with her parents, former slaves, but we kind of skip to her adult life. And in her adult life, she's married to an abusive piece of shit husband who beats her, and the stress of that husband and her business of washing clothes or being a wash maiden, because back then they didn't have washing machines, so whatever. So because of that stress, her hair begins to fall out and she has terrible hair, holes in her, patches in her hair, and it's terrible and she feels hideous. She lost all self-confidence, and it isn't until Addie Monroe, a beautiful light-skinned high yellow woman, comes in and is trying to sell her hair product. Now at this point, Sarah doesn't have any money to buy the hair products or any desire to do so. So Addie, out of the goodness of her heart, decides to, let me give Sarah, let me testimonial, let me do her hair and help her grow with my product and use that as testimonial. So as months go by, Sarah's hair goes full effect, and the beauty of it all, people start to see it. Sarah recommends her customers and Addie's product is growing. And at the time, Sarah's self-confidence is also growing to the point where she marries Charles James Walker, which is C.J. Walker. But after marrying CJ and getting her hair and her confidence back, she wants to start selling Addie's products. However, Addie doesn't want Sarah to sell the products because Sarah isn't yellow, Sarah isn't fine or skinny, and she's not the typical standardized European beauty model that you can be at the time, because she's black, and because she's not light-skinned, she can't portray that. So Addie does not want her associated with her product because she's trying to sell to a look. She's trying to sell a design, the high yellow, beautiful woman, exotic type of look with European features, which Sarah doesn't have. So Sarah at this point takes matters into her own hands, takes some of Addie's product and sells it and makes a killing, because to this day, the cultural impact of this show is relevant to this day, because even to this day, as recently as a couple of years ago, there weren't any makeup lines selling to African American women with dark features or African features. So the fact that that is an underserved market who also need these products, Sarah was able to tap into that product over 100 years ago. And the fact that that very notion of being underserved perpetuates from back then to now is a huge thing. Like, it can't be understated how African American women who spend by far per capita the most on beauty products are underserved and don't have their needs met. So Sarah capitalized on this, and when she shows Addie the results, the fruits, like, she's selling shit out, but Addie doesn't. Addie gets angry. Sarah is not what she wants to represent her company, because again, the preconceived notions of European beauty is not in the African woman, even though Sarah herself is a pretty good looking woman in her own right, but because she doesn't have the Eurocentric features, because of course Addie is light-skinned, and that's because her mother was a former slave, and the master of her mother came in and forced himself on Addie's mom, and Addie was born, she's biracial, so she has that intrinsic whiteness as a part of her DNA, while Sarah's purely African. So Sarah says, fuck it, fuck Addie, I'm gonna do this myself, steals Addie's formula and begins to sell it and begins to have high success to the point where she is too big for her own town and moves to St. Louis because she just can't, like, the town she's in now is just not big enough. So she moves to St. Louis and she begins to outsell to the point where Addie follows her to St. Louis because she sees that her product is selling. Sarah's product is selling. It's outselling Addie's, and Addie was the progenitor of this formula. But because of her limited scope and vision, she is unable to grow her brand like Sarah or CJ Walker is able to grow her brand, because CJ tapped into a market that needs it. And this market is not perpetuated or sought out by mainstream media or mainstream products, because it's just stupidity and bigotry and racism at this point, because there's no way you would not tap into that market unless there were some underlying issues there. So she can't seem to understand why. And as the story goes on, we see Madam C.J. Walker's empire build, because again, black women are powerful as shit, and she is capitalizing on that market. But as the series goes on, we see some different things. We start to understand different aspects of society at the time, and that society still perpetuates to this day different dynamics, because this is also a society of, there were people who were alive in this time who were slaves and they were emancipated, like CJ Walker's father Cleophas, who was a slave and he was freed. There are also people like Sarah and Addie, whose parents were born slaves, so they have that direct link. And then you have more free-spirited people who are about 2 generations removed from slavery, or who are removed. Their parents were not slaves, so they don't have that mindset. And that's Lelia, which is CJ Walker's daughter, and she's able to explore her own life and her own queerness because, you know, she's not bound by such a struck and rigid society, even though, you know, it is, because it's 19 something as opposed to our society now where we're more free. But to her, this is the freest a black person has been in America at that point in the 1910s, 1920s, because they're about 40, 50 years removed from slavery. So you have that dynamic. And then you have also the dynamic of the black woman and the black man and power dynamics and power structures, because at this point, Madam CJ Walker is a self-made millionaire. She is powerful. And then her husband CJ isn't as powerful because it's not his company, it's not his idea, and his reasoning and his need to be a man and his self-validation as a man is being challenged because he is not the provider. She is. He is not the breadwinner, nor does he make the major decisions. It's not his company. Every power dynamic that a man would use at the time to perpetuate themselves above a woman is in Madam CJ Walker's hands at this point. And that causes a huge dynamic that challenges the very notion of CJ's manhood. And at the time, masculinity at itself is very rigid, especially black masculinity. When your father was a slave, so you understand how your father was already emasculated by his master, and now you're free, but yet now you are technically being emasculated in your head by your wife, so you're nothing, essentially. That's what CJ thought. So he goes out and kind of sabotages some of Madam CJ Walker's or Sarah's endeavors. He also starts cheating on her which was a very interesting dynamic. He begins to cheat on her and have an affair with one of her workers, someone who is beneath Sarah's level. However, because she is light-skinned, high yellow, and she has the European ethno features, and she has the light skin, the white skin, if you will, it shows the dynamic that Sarah is powerful. The first woman millionaire, first self-made millionaire in America, first self-made woman millionaire in America. And she happens to be black. This is the pinnacle of some shit you can achieve. Like, Sarah is this off the screen? Sarah's here, and you're dating someone who works for her as a salesperson, who's down here, but because she's high yellow, you switch the dynamic and overvalue her over Sarah. And that is the crazy part. And that just shows how deep rooted some of this stuff is in our society, is that we have a perception of beauty that supersedes common sense and rationality, because there's no way you should be fucking with this girl when Sarah is like off the fucking screen, a millionaire. But because of the ingrained self-destruction, not self-destruction, but because of the ingrained messaging we've gotten, how white and yellow is better. And this show does a good thing of perpetuating that narrative, because Madam CJ Walker, no matter how much she achieves, no matter how much she moves forward, she is always being pushed back by society in a sense, especially black society, because that's what they show when we're dealing with, of course, what's his name? Booker T. Washington, the great compromiser, and how he is pushing her aside. And when they finally have a woman to speak at his convention, he chooses Addie, who is nowhere near Madam CJ Walker's level when it comes to business, but because, of course, she's beautiful, she's high, they trot her out. And that shows just Sarah fighting that constantly. Even after she's made it, she's still looked upon bad by her fellow black people. But it's not just all of them, because when she goes to New York and she meets more educated black people, such as W.E.D. Boys and such, they respect for her for what she does. So it's not all black people, it's more the ignorant kind, but the more educated kind, we also understand the dynamics of what we need to do to advance as a race, and we're not so stuck in these rigid mindsets. But for the majority of the others, it's a lot. It's really a lot. And this show does a lot in 4 episodes to show that dichotomy, to show the range of emotions. Because back to Lelia and her queerness and her fact that she is into women in the show, and she was married at a point, but her husband wasn't doing it for him. Her husband, again, the dynamic that CJ showed, the masculinity, he was nothing, and he married the daughter of Madam CJ Walker. So like they're rising, and he is also self-sabotaging. And it goes to show like the black man, because of the way things have been ingrained in him, he will self-sabotage everything if he is not the sole breadwinner. That's the narrative that the show is pushing. Whether it's true or not is up for debate, but I've seen it happen. I've seen it the other way around as well. Some support their women, some don't, but that's just the overall thing that slavery and supremacy has dived into us. So the show shows her rise and the cultural impact that it has, because black women and their hair is something black men and their hair, look at my hair, like it's something that isn't relatively catered to by mainstream. You don't see that much commercials. Like when you do see commercials on TV, it's usually the flowing hair, the whatever. Very few products I've made for them, and that shows that despite all that, they can transcend, but they have to fight through so many more obstacles within outside factors and within inside factors that goes and just really shows just the lengths and the resistance that we have to go through. And the fact that she was able to persevere and go through all that is very important, and it resonates to this day. One thing that the show didn't do about Madam CJ Walker any justice is the fact that it didn't show her other involvements. Aside from the fact about the hair and her company, she was a philanthropist, she was into the arts. There were so many things that she did with her money and her time and her power. The fact where she was the first black woman to move in a neighborhood and lived next to Rockefeller, that in itself is Jesus. Her parents were slaves and she was never supposed to be here, but because she was able to tap into the black dollar and the black cultural identity, she was able to reach up and get to that level. That shows that black money and black power is something that can be behold. Anyway, guys, that is Self-Made, the Madam CJ Walker story. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. If you liked the video, definitely give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you guys have not already. And until next time, binge on.